But before we get to that, we'll look at some geek news, and we've just gone through and noticed some random news articles that were pertinent to today or the past few days, and we're going to talk about those for just a little bit. And I'll let John start us off.
Yeah, I've got a few things. Well, the first thing that's kind of pretty important, I think, is the fact that Superman's briefs are coming back in the comic books. They've been gone for a few years now, I guess since 2010-ish, and I think that's I was never really a fan of the briefs.
So you prefer the just solid blue?
Well, yeah. I mean, I understand that you kind of want to break it up a little bit. So,
right.
The red belt makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't understand. I'm just not a fan of the underwear.
Are these going to be the tidy whitey briefs that are back?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah. That's what I'm seeing. Another little thing is that the Crow reboot has finally gotten a release date. It's going to be October the 11th of next year, 2019. And Aquaman's going to be in it.
My man.
Yeah, my man.
That's right.
I don't know
how you feel about that.
I'm going to be. I try to approach these things with a certain reservation of. I'm trying to think how to put it. It's like when Gal Gadot was cast as Wonder Woman,
and everybody said she's too skinny.
Well, I just wasn't thrilled with the news, but I held out. And I wasn't going to make any judgment.
Now
until
she's the most awesome Wonder Woman ever.
Isn't she? I held out all judgment until I actually saw it, and it's kind of the same way with a lot of these things that we see. The Heath Ledger Joker, and then I'm kind of the same way with Zachary Levi.
It's tough. I get it. You talk about when The Crow came out and Brandon Lee. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the familial ties there, and his legacy, and then obviously what happened during the filming of that movie. And honestly, Brandon Lee, I mean, he knocked that performance out of the park for what it was supposed to be. And how is anybody going to compare to that when they're going to reboot it? But Jason Momoa, I mean, he looks like he could be the Crow.
Well, yeah, I feel like he could do it, but at the same time, we have to go into it and have the understanding that it's not going to be the movie that we saw before.
Well, and that's kind of like we've said before, the way I approach all the comic book movies. Mm-hmm. I just have to understand that this is a different universe, and it's different stories and different characters. It's not going to line up exactly like what you expect from the comics.
Right.
And so I'll probably approach The Crow the same way. Like, this is just a new thing. I did that with most all of the reboots that are starting to come out now.
Well, we've got to treat it like we always treat these kind of films. Is we have to enjoy it for what it is, for what it's meant to be. Can we turn around and watch it again? Well, we want to. Is a big thing. And Disney has set release dates for 7 Marvel movies from 2020 and beyond. So I don't.
So Infinity War is not going to be the end.
It is not. Apparently they've got a lot of things planned. It looks like from. Well, let's see. I lost it. Here it is. Okay, from about the middle of 2020 until the middle of 2022. So,
what a great time to be alive.
Isn't that the truth?
I think back, and we're probably going to do an episode eventually about maybe the history of comic book movies. Mm-hmm. Some good, some bad, some completely terrible. Why did you make it? Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just think about those years before, from Superman 78 all the way up. You had some hits, some misses. But right now, even the DC movies, I mean, people are kind of dumping on them a little bit, but it's just because they're not as completely awesome as the Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. But they're still so much better. They're leaps and bounds better than what comic book movies used to be.
Especially in the 90s.
Right.
I always go back to that old Captain America movie.
Right.
How bad that movie was.
And we're going to look back on this time as the golden age for sure of comic book movies, and it's become its own genre. So you have horror, comedy, romance, and comic movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like there's been so many comic movies now that they're getting their own subgenre. You may have some comic book movies that are horror comic movies. We already have some horror comic shows. You got The Walking Dead, things like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, they've talked about, and I haven't read up on it in a while or haven't seen anything on it in a while, is the Justice League Dark.
Right.
And I wanted to say that they were planning either a film or a television show based on that. And I feel like that could be something that would be interesting. Because that would take what we've seen in the Justice League films and then make it just a completely different world.
And I'll mention this. I forgot to mention this in doing the things, but one of the things that both of us did this week is we got to watch the animated Gotham by Gaslight. And I had never read the graphic novel, but I'll say right off the bat that this one is another great example of what DC is doing in the animated space. And I'll say this too, like if you're a parent, the DC animated movies, they're not for kids.
This one is not.
This one definitely not.
This is not.
It's not written, it's not designed for kids. It is an adult storyline. It's just like the graphic novel. But DC, their animation studios, with most of their animated movies, are knocking it out of the park.
Absolutely. And it goes far back as far as, Batman, Superman, Public Enemies. Back when that was out.
Right. That was a good one.
I really enjoyed that one. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. And this one is no different. I really wish that they would do something with Kingdom Come.
Animated or live action?
I feel like a live action would cost too much.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. Like while I was watching Gotham by Gaslight, I mean, it's awesome the way it is, and I don't mind watching an animated film. I enjoy that just as much as anything. But I kept thinking this would be such a great live action film. Mm-hmm. But then you get to looking at some of the things that are going on. Well, yeah, that would be kind of expensive. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you understand why they're better because they're cheaper to make, so right. they can put more awesome things on screen. Yeah, but it seems like the writers and the people involved in making the animated features are just seem to be better at this than the live action crews.
Well, I think part of the problem though is, and a lot of the critical response to the Justice League film was that it seemed like one of their cartoons.
Yeah.
And it could have been for the storyline that they had with it. And that was, I think, one of the big things there is that they could have done the same thing in a cartoon.
Well, and I enjoyed Justice League. It wasn't what I would have written or what I would have wanted. They completely wasted the death and return of Superman. I used to say I would love to see a live-action trilogy of Death and Return of Superman. Mm-hmm. They finally used it, but like I said before, it's in the most disappointing way possible.
Oh, yeah.
So everything they're doing is like, yeah, you used that up. You just wasted that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hoping they're gonna get things kind of on the right track with the movies coming up. I'm still looking forward to the Aquaman movie. We talked about that when we were talking about Marvel versus DC.
I will say that I do really enjoy how they've changed Aquaman and actually made him a relevant character.
Right.
Because for years the argument about the complaint, I should say, about Aquaman was the fact that he just talks to fish. He's just a guy that talks to fish. and he's a superhero.
Well, he says it in Justice League. The ocean does the talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it actually makes him a pretty cool character, and I felt like he was part of the comic relief of the film.
Right.
He and the Flash character.
Well, and that we could get back off on that tangent for another 2 hours.
Such an easy.
We're such big DC fans. We want DC to succeed. I mean, We don't discriminate, though. We'll watch any comic book movie. So
True story.
it's not like I'm going to be down on Marvel. I watch everything they put out, and we'll keep doing that as long as they're good. So
Yeah, it's like, we were talking about back in the 80s and 90s and how bad those films were. And they got worse as they went on. Especially like you talk about the Superman films. And, growing up, that was the case. I was a comic book fan, and comic book movies were not a thing, and comic book characters were not cool.
yeah.
And similarly, I was a Patriots fan in the 80s, and the Patriots were so bad.
And now the world has caught up with you.
I know. It's about time. It is about time.
One of the news stories that I didn't even realize it till today, but February 27th, 2018 was the 30th anniversary of one of the greatest movies ever, Bloodsport.
Why didn't that make our list of favorite movies?
It's one of those, I haven't thought about it in a long time. It used to be on TBS every other day when we were younger, but I used to be just a huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fan. And that movie, Bloodsport, was the one that kind of got me started. And
well, you knew about the time that he would make the weird, he'd stick his arms out and he'd go blah.
Yeah, everybody knows how to do
it's over with.
Do his sounds. And of course I know how to do his kick, but I can't do it like he does it. It doesn't look anything like his.
Can you do the splits like you can?
No. I can't get close to doing the splits like he does.
I don't want to see you try, because then I'd have to pick you up out of the floor.
I found this article.
Explain to your wife
and
what's going on.
Honestly, I just Googled Bloodsport 30th anniversary. And I found this article. 10 gut-punching facts about Bloodsport on its 30th anniversary. And we won't look at all of them, but there were a few that stood out. And honestly, like, I'm a big fan of kung fu movies. This isn't exactly like a pure kung fu movie, but the way it's set up, the way the storyline plays out, it says it's a true story. I don't know how true the story is. But that's one of the things that this article mentioned. It said, though it's billed as a true story, it probably isn't. And there are some pretty amazing things that go on in that movie that you could say, okay, I get how that might have been embellished a little bit for the film. Let's see. One of the other ones, JCVD got paid peanuts for the movie. I believe that. This was his first big role. He had played bit parts in a few movies before this. And while you could see, the talent and the skill there, this was his first shot at stardom or having the starring role. And honestly, I mean, if somebody asked me to star in a movie and they offered me peanuts, I'd probably take it.
Absolutely. They did that for most of the Marvel movies. Their first movies, they made not much. Like, I want to say it was maybe $500,000 per movie, which by that standard is ridiculously low.
Yeah, and it was an all new thing, almost. So this I'd kind of thought before, but I didn't know for a fact. But Bloodsport inspired Mortal Kombat.
That makes sense.
I could see that. Bloodsport, of course, the Kumite. If you've seen that movie, you know what that is. But it was just awesome the way it was set up, all the different characters, the different fighting styles that they had, and it's this kind of no rules type contest, and I guess it's like MMA before we got MMA, except it's way cooler because
that was kind of the thing that everybody caught on to.
Right. And that was one of the things that you saw in Bloodsport in the movie was you had completely, like even in MMA today, you have weight classes because you don't want it to be just completely lopsided. But in the Kumite in Bloodsport, you had all shapes and sizes, all fighting styles, nationalities. Everybody just, whoever they drew, they'd fight. So you'd have huge sumo guys fighting little bitty guys, And it was interesting to see in that movie. Another fun fact was that there wasn't a single stuntman in the movie.
Really?
Now that makes sense. Of course, I knew Jean-Claude Van Damme was, he does all his own stuff. But every fighter in the movie, that was their actual skills. And so they were on display. So no stuntmen.
That's cool.
There were other martial artists. Obviously, most everybody involved was trained. And so you kind of get a sense of that. Even watching the movie, you can see all the different fighting styles and how they mesh or don't mesh on the mat. The last one it mentions is naturally there's a remake in the works.
30 years later? Well, it makes sense because
30 years later, we got a remake to Bloodsport to look forward to. All I need to know is Jean-Claude Van Damme reprising the role or what? Was he gonna?
Well, if it's a remake, I would assume not, but I don't know who
you think he gets a bit part, like a nice cameo, or
like a Stan Lee,
something like that?
Yeah. Well, maybe. And another, I'd probably see it just because.
If it's Bloodsport, it's the official remake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna see it.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
That's part of my problem when I'm picking movies to see. I don't discriminate too much. I mean, if it's something that halfway interests me,
oh yeah,
I tend not to read reviews or look at the critiques of it. I'm just going to go see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's either entertaining or not.
I've got one more.
One more bit of news.
One more bit of news that I forgot to mention a moment ago.
Okay.
And for those of us who are 80s children, we might remember this.
There you go, making me feel old again.
I know, but this is okay because hopefully it'll be good. Steve Austin is coming back, and I'm not talking about Stone Cold. I'm talking about the $6 billion man.
Oh wow!
Yeah, absolutely.
Now it should be noted that this is how old we are. That at the time it was the $6 million man. And that used to be a much bigger amount than it is now.
Right, yeah, but now it's $6 billion.
It's kind of the Dr. Evil thing in the Austin Powers movies where he says $1 million and everybody's, what are you talking about? That's nothing.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but actually Mark Wahlberg is going to be in this one. And they have set a release date, and it ran away from me. Okay, there it is. May 31st of 2019. So that would be something good to look forward to, and we may try to we could do a podcast about 80s movie remakes.
Are we going to see a Bionic Woman movie as well?
I'm sure. As much as we've seen
another cinematic universe,
might as well, right?
I'd see him.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'd see him.
No doubt.
Well, that piques my interest. Now it's the $6 billion man,
right.
Obviously,
right?
But that's something that hasn't been, oversaturated and redone 5 or 6 times. So that might be a good one. If they do it right, that'd be a good one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Well, that's all my news.